Hi, it's the Chappiness guy. Welcome to today's episode of Vestibular Talks. Today's special guest is Kathy O'Shea. She's a successful professor of literature and philosophy in New York. She's also a very talented and published author that has written many articles as well as the book So Much More Than a Headache, where she gives us an introduction about what migraine is and how debilitating it can be. She's also a migraine sufferer, so she understands the ins and outs of this condition and how it impacts our daily lives. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, find your happiness, guys.
We good?
Now we're live. Kathy,
Okay,
how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be talking to you. And I thank you for taking the time to join us and chat a little bit about what migraine is and tell us your life journey. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. More than happy to get the word out. I think it's very important.
Yes, yes, raising awareness means a lot for sure.
It
Uh,
certainly does.
Kathy, do you mind telling us a little bit about you, who you are?
Sure. I'm a 57-year-old female that's had chronic migraine for 43 years. But it's certainly not all of who I am. I'm a community college professor of English and philosophy and have been for 34 years now. And I have a husband and two golden retrievers and a cat, and we live in upstate New York. So it's gray here most of the time this time of year, but we don't have much snow at the moment, so that's nice.
Okay, well, I live in Canada, so lots of us know.
Oh, yes. What part of Canada are you?
In Calgary, in the western
Oh,
side.
yeah, okay. Beautiful, beautiful country.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, very nice, very nice. Kathy, you just mentioned that you've lived with chronic migraines for a long time. Were they episodic before, or they just suddenly hit you chronically?
Oh, no, that's a good question. I'm glad that you asked because I meant I should have clarified that. They started out episodic when I was 14. And I think almost every migrainer can remember their very first. And I remember mine very vividly.
Okay.
And so I was 14 years old and they were episodic, but so little was known about migraine at that time. It was misunderstood, it was misdiagnosed. I remember my parents taking me for treatment and for tests of all kinds. And I did see a neurologist at the time, but all they kept doing was putting me on these really heavy duty painkillers. And uh, they were, medications that were developed for other conditions. And they would make me extremely ill. And I just remember, again, just to reiterate, so little was known then about them. I mean, we know so much more about migraine now, and only recently, as you probably know, in the last 2 years or so, have they actually developed medication that's specifically for migraine, and that is a huge development, certainly in treatment.
That is a huge breakthrough for sure, Kathy. And when I'm sorry that you had to experience such a debilitating condition at such a young age, at 14 years old. That is quite rough. How did that affect your growth, your development, your personal life at 14? Because you're probably getting into high school and hitting as well as around that age we hit puberty. So a lot of changes are happening like with our hormones. So how did that affect or had any influence in your migraines?
Sure, great question. Yeah, I think I know a lot of young women, with going through puberty and have menstrual condition. Menstruation can cause, and the hormonal changes can cause migraine. That wasn't the case for me. That was never a trigger for me.
Mhm.
However, it influenced my life in terms of it's taking away a lot of choices and freedoms, I would say, because I was extremely active in high school and both in athletics, I had to give up basketball and volleyball and softball and those sports because that kind of exertion could bring on attacks. I also was very involved in, like other kinds of extracurricular activities. And I remember vividly this one day, my dad was school superintendent at the school I attended. And this one day, he came home, he and my mom came home. They found me in the bathroom, curled up in a fetal position. And my dad said, that's it. She's got to give up something. I was doing too much. I was too involved. And the stress of it was taking a toll. And I just remembered crying, sobbing on the floor because I didn't want to choose what to give up.
Yeah.
So I think that those are some of the ways in which it impacted me, and it impacted my parents tremendously too, because there was so little known. They would tried everything to get me help, and nothing was working. And then I went through a period probably in my 20s, 30s, where again they were episodic. They weren't all that frequently, and I became chronic actually following a hysterectomy I had in my late 30s. Okay. And so at that point I became chronic, and it's never gone back to episodic.
Mm. So I know we're not doctors, but in your own words, what's the difference between episodic and chronic? Is it a chronic when you mean daily symptoms, or what is the difference between the two?
So according to the doctors, and obviously I did have to do a fair amount of research for the book, and also I've remained in touch with the doctor that I dedicated the book to, my headache specialist, who's now retired. And the definition of chronic is 15 days or more per month, in which you have some symptoms. And what a lot of people, I think migraine is still largely stigmatized and misunderstood, is that it is, as my title suggests, so much more than the headache itself. And it affects your whole being. And you can be like right now, I've been in an intractable migraine for, this is the 7th day, and I'm just getting some relief today. But it wasn't, that doesn't mean I'm in bed with it for 7 days. It means that it's somewhere in the cycle, of one, and it hasn't lifted, completely from me.
And speaking of the book, I have my copy right here. So yes, as people can see, it says So Much More Than a Headache, Understanding Migraine Through Literature. Excellent book. I enjoyed it a lot. I quite enjoyed the read. And in page, at the beginning, in the preface, and this is page 12, I believe it is.
Sure.
You do say in there, the truth is that most of the general public still see migraine as only a headache, rather than the complex brain disease that we know it is. Kathy, why do you think that is? Why do you think that so many people say, oh yeah, migraine is, well, you must have a headache, take an Advil, take an aspirin. Why do you think that not many people understand the complexity of the actual condition itself?
I think in part it's complex, but I think in part it's a lack of education. It's a disease that hasn't been given the attention that it deserves. It hasn't been given until very recently the research money that it deserves. So people haven't taken it seriously. And I think too, it really goes back historically to in the 18th and 19th century, when women, who we now know suffered from migraine, were treated for hysteria. And yes. So, right. So, and they would treat it by taking away the very creative outlets and freedoms that would give people relief from the condition, some aspects of the condition. And it's still largely stigmatized as a woman's illness. In fact, there are so few headache specialists now. We're in a very kind of frightening time in terms of the number of 39 million migraineurs in the United States, and I can't be quoted on this, but I believe it's something like only 500 headache specialists. And I once asked a previous headache specialist, one I had after my other doctor retired, I asked her why so few? Why are not more doctors specializing in this disease? And she said, believe it or not, this was a quote I remember so vividly. She said, because it's not a sexy disease. And people still consider it a women's disease, and that they still have the stigma of it as being something much lesser than what it is.
You're completely correct, Kathy, and I couldn't agree with you more. Even something that you also mentioned in the same page, page 12 of the preface, about the third paragraph, about the middle of it, you said, those of us who live with migraine in all of its forms crave having some understanding, truly understand what we live with. The often excruciating pain we think no one else could possibly have endured, the losses, the loneliness, and the sacrifices directly and indirectly caused by the disease. You nailed it. You nailed it by saying that, because it's so true. Like it just this condition affects every aspect of our lives, and there are so many uh, types of migraines. For example, myself,
Yes.
I've been diagnosed with vestibular migraines.
Oh my, yes.
So rather than the pain itself, it gives me vertigo attacks, dizziness, the sense of unbalance, visual disturbances, nausea, things like that. And all of that affects your quality of life, your daily
Yes.
activities. It affects driving for sure. It affects working and how you perform at work or going to school. And it affects your day-to-day relationships with your families and with your
Yes.
loved ones. So you nailed it right there. And what do you think is needed in order to raise more awareness to help people understand that migraine encompasses all these different areas of our lives? Like I know that it's an invisible illness. So when people see someone with cancer, when people see someone with a broken arm or broken leg, they are like, oh my God, like that's really bad. But when they see someone with migraine, they're like, oh, just close your eyes for a bit or sleep it off. What do you think we need to do to raise that awareness and build that momentum?
I think people like you are helping with that. I mean, I think that only by spreading the word, getting the word out in forums like you're providing. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know. I'm hoping my book has some. That's one of the reasons that gave me the impetus to write it, was that I was frustrated with the lack of awareness and the lack. Even people I know quite well don't fully get it. They don't fully, they want to. It's not their fault. It's just that I guess there's no way, because it is invisible. There's no way other than those who know me well and look at my eyes and can know right away. uh there's the other aspects that you mentioned, like even like the cognitive problems that come with it. I mean, for me at work, I teach, and I can be in a classroom if I'm going through a rough time, and I'll have word blanks. And it's English I teach, it's language, it's the power of the word, and all of a sudden I don't have a word.
Yeah.
Or I use the wrong word, and I have to try to cover for that. And driving, you mentioned, I can understand with vestibular migraine, it would be a real problem and difficulty. For me, it's more of a problem, like Joan Didion mentions, and I think it's Joan Didion mentions in her essay in the book In Bed, that you have to remind yourself what a green light means go and red means red. And I miss exits all the time, if I'm in the middle of it. Because you don't have the cognitive ability and the focus, and you have that fogginess that it's hard to explain to people. I think that's part of it. And I think, I mentioned in the preface too that, Virginia Woolf says that, there's that great quote of hers, I don't think I'll find it fast enough, where she mentions that, anything else you could turn to literature and the power of language to describe, but try to describe pain, what pain is, and so try to describe the various aspects of what we mean by when we say we have fogginess, and we are more clumsy, and we just feel unwell. there's that excerpt I have, I think it's by Oliver Sacks in there, that talk in the book that talks about, just the feeling of being unwell. And it's hard to describe that, but it affects your whole being, as you mentioned, your quality of life, your relationships with people, your work, your what you can do in a day and what you can't. It affects your whole, I would also say, your sense of time. And what I mean by that is, if you have a migraine that finally lifts, I think I mentioned this in the section when it's gone,
Yeah.
I know when it's lifted, because I'm a different person. I mean, and I'll know just in that split second, and that I'm me again. It's like that monster inside of me is temporarily, gone away, taking a vacation.
Yeah.
And 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 so it's hard to describe all of that,
It is.
in language.
It is. And again, in the preface in page 19, you at the beginning of the paragraph, you mentioned the invisibility of migraine and it's just a headache follow the stigma and misunderstanding involving the disease, leading us into a multitude of treatments, the lifetime of struggles, and the awareness that comes with living with chronic illness. It's a lifelong full-time job which focuses in multitude of treatments, lifetime struggles, and living with it for years with chronic illness. Kathy, it is true because, for example, for me, I have to have a routine. I wake up, I take my supplements every day. Then I know that I have to drink water when I wake up or celery juice. And then I have to plan out my day. Going to work, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, see these people, and I'm gonna make sure that if anything happens, I have enough time to have something to eat in between, so that way I don't trigger a migraine. That I take my pills at a certain time, so I don't trigger the migraine. That I drink certain amount of water throughout the day, so I don't trigger the migraine. That I do breathing exercises, so I don't trigger the migraine. So we always have all these procedures that we have to do in order to function in your normal life. Is there anything like that you have to do as well on your own case, when like with going to work, with going out with family and things like that?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I just wrote an article for the blog for Psychology Today. I wrote it, just put it out yesterday, actually, and about this idea of it being a full-time job. Because like you mentioned, you have to have a routine, and there are so many different different aspects of our lives that are completely controlled by migraine. Yes. Or the threat of migraine, shall I say. So like you say, we do everything we can to avoid our triggers. We learn what our triggers are. We try everything we can to avoid them. But it takes, to steal a cliche at this point, it takes a village, really. So, I see on every week, I see a physical therapist who treats my neck, because mine stem from kind of, they're cervicogenic, so they come from that. And so I see a physical therapist every week. I see a chiropractor every week. I see my neurologist. I get my Botox. I get nerve blocks. I get, and then you take all your medications. I drink plenty of water throughout the day. I don't have food allergy. I don't have food triggers, but you limit alcohol intake. You have to get a sleep pattern that stays the same. It can't be any longer. It can't be any shorter, right? So these are the things. I try to get exercise, but it's hard to get exercise when you're in pain, so these are the things that we do, right? I mean, as you say, and it's like a full-time job to just manage and try to control them and try to our best to prevent them.
Yes, Kathy. And this is page 23 in Bed by Joan Didion.
Yes.
Says, at the bottom paragraph, it was a long time before I began thinking mechanistically enough to accept migraine for what it was, something with which I will be living, the way some people live with diabetes. So as we know, unfortunately, there is no cure for migraine. There is no cure. There is different treatments. Up to recently, like you mentioned, the treatments are actually treatments focused on actual migraine, because before they used to prescribe antidepressants, yes, or pills that were for seizures and
Yes.
or beta blockers, things like that. What do you feel was the turning point that made them actually look for a medication that is specifically targets migraine? What do you think happened?
I think scientists started understanding what migraine is. I mean, I think that was the difference. So as you say, I mean, most of the preventative medications and rescue medications that we would take would be treatments for something else, and then kind of keep trying so much trial and error, with those medications as well. But I do think it's when there started to be, and I don't know what the impetus was for science to make these, finally give it some of the focus it deserves. But I think when they started to understand that it isn't like an overactive brain, that your brain is hypersensitive, and therefore we have these strange symptoms like, hypersensitivity to sound and smell and, touch, some people do. And, people kind of laugh that off. But those are, for me, I don't have hypersensitivity to touch during a migraine or smell, but I do to sound. In fact, my husband will know when I'm starting to get a migraine, or if I'm starting to feel like one's coming on, because I'll just say to him all of a sudden, you got to turn that down. Like the TV might be at a very normal volume, but I can't take it, And so I think when they started to realize that it was, what was really happening in the brain, they started to be able to target medications that were more directly effective. And also, I know, and I'm not any kind of expert, but I know that they're all different. I also use oh my gosh, a cephaly device.
Oh, okay.
Are you familiar with those?
Yep.
Yep. I've used that for years now, and I swear by it. For me, it's been it's a big difference maker. It has, for me, I use it preventatively, and I use it, I kind of have the original one, so it's not the new one on the market that actually is one that has dual control for preventative and rescue, but I use it for both, and it's held off migraines when nothing else would for me. So I that's something that's part of my regimen as well, every day for an hour.
Yeah, and yes, it's many things. Like you said, many people get affected by touch, other ones get affected by light, other ones by sound. It's so unique to each individual. Like it's so there is not a proper pattern that it follows. And speaking of patterns, page 11 by Oliver Sacks, on page 11, paragraph 4, you did talk about something that I experience quite frequently. It says, in my own migraine auras, I will sometimes see vividly with closed eyes, more faintly and transparently if I keep my eyes open. Tiny branching lines like twigs or geometrical structures covering the entire visual field. Checkerboards, cobwebs, honeycombs, and more elaborate patterns like Turkish carpets. And you elaborate more in there. Kathy, like do you believe that this is part of the brain electrical storm that is happening? Because when I saw my neurologist, uh, he understood what a migraine was just by the fact that I was so freaked out, telling him, I'm like, I think I'm hallucinating. I see geometrical patterns and almost like static in the wall. And he's like, no, don't worry, that's a migraine. What do you think is happening in our brain causing these patterns for us to see?
Boy, I wish I knew. That's where we need the scientists to help us on that one. I don't experience aura, so I've never had that as part of my migraine. I have a friend who has vestibular migraine,
Okay.
and I also I through him, and it's been only recently diagnosed. And I also have a friend though that it just has ocular migraine, so she only gets the aura. She doesn't get she doesn't get anything else. So I find the readings that I included here, that try to depict the aura very vivid, and I would think someone like you that has experienced some of that would find that just like, yeah, somebody gets that, that is what it's like. So I think it paints some of these pieces paint a pretty good picture for those who have experienced that. It's
Yes,
got to be frightening initially, I would think.
it is, and that's why I think your book is so brilliant because it talks about different aspects of migraine in the different opinions of the different people that you quote in the book. Like everybody has such a unique journey that is so different. In page 20, for example, this is something that I really like. You say that about in the middle of the paragraph of page 20, in the one, two, three, third paragraph, you said that in many cases people see massage therapists because of the muscle tension that the headaches cause. We see ENT specialists that diagnose us with sinus problems, chiropractors that blame spinal deformities, and so on and so forth. And because he says, indeed, when the only tool you own is a hammer, every problem begins to resemble a nail. And this is very correct because, and it frustrates me a little bit, Kathy, because many medical professionals, let's say, like, I'm not talking bad about anybody. I respect all of them, but let's say many chiropractors, many physiotherapists, many massage therapists, they often overpromise and they said, "Oh, you have a migraine? With 6 sessions of chiropractor, I cure your migraine." So your hopes go up, and you're
Yeah,
like, "Oh
exactly.
yes, finally someone can help me." And after you do the treatments, and you do many treatments and spend the financial burden because the treatments are expensive,
Yes. Yeah.
and then you still have the condition after many treatments. Now you get deflated, and you start blaming yourself. You feel guilt because you're like, well, why didn't I heal? Is it me? Is it my fault? Am I not doing things properly? So what do you think we need to do in order to not warn, but prepare people to understand that there is not a miracle cure that is going to just happen like that?
I think you make an excellent point about and the fact that we do need to make people that are experiencing migraine and their loved ones that help support them, that there is no magic bullet. I mean, I think there was this is just my own opinion now, okay, that there was a little bit of overpromise when these new CGRPs came out in terms of rescue. Yes, I mean, I have had some good success with them. I've tried. I'm on my second one now, but there's no cure. And I think you're right. When you go to a doctor that specializes in one area, then they think they can solve it. And then I don't know how many times, you're right, we ride a roller coaster because we get our hopes up that something new that's come is, or different that we haven't tried is going to resolve
That's the
this.
one, yeah.
And let me just give you a quick example. This happened to me just a couple of days ago. I don't know if you're familiar with the oral form of one of the CGRPs, but it's Ubrevely,
Okay.
and that's taken as a rescue,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a tablet, and it's one of the newer ones out there,
Okay.
and it I started taking it. It's the first thing I would turn to. You're supposed to take it as soon as you start to feel anything coming on,
Right.
and it was helping me. It really was. It was stopping the migraine from developing further. I was having good success with it. I was still needing it a lot because I'm a chronic migrainer. It's not gonna, stop that.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to get a refill on that, and this was last month. They cut even though my neurologist had ordered 30 pills, the insurance company only covered 16.
Uh,
And the pharmacist said to me, and this was so upsetting, said, "You should only take it when you really need it." And I thought, wow, you don't get it at all.
yeah.
And then 2 days ago, I went to pick up my next month's supply.
Mm-hmm.
They cut it to 8.
Oh,
Now
they
insurance
kind of
companies cover 8 pills a month. So then something else that we have to deal with, and I'm sure you know this too, is choices we have to make.
yes.
When it comes to medications even or treatments, like when you mentioned the financial burden, uh, I have to decide now with only 8 pills for the month. If I start to feel one coming on, do I take that pill now or am I going to need it more later?
Yeah.
And these kind of decisions are unfair. I mean, they seem unfair. I mean, a lot in life is unfair, but it's just that sure you give us something that helps, and then you take it away because it's so expensive to manufacture apparently, or they're whatever. I won't get into the insurance company thing, but anyway, you mentioned the financial burden and those kinds of psychological choices that we're faced with all the time, and those are real struggles too.
You're right, and it is unfair, like you're saying, it is unfair because not only you're dealing with a very real condition, now you have to, like you said, make choices that are adding this overwhelming pressure to your
Yes,
life because you're like, well, do I take it now? Do I wait until it gets worse? Am I not able to make it last? So like yes, it's really unfortunate. And speaking of medication, Kathy, page 66. Um, at the beginning of the paragraph, it says, then, of course, there are the difficult side effects from the multitude of preventative,
oh
acute,
yeah,
and rescue medications, most of which alter the sufferer physically and emotionally in other ways that we can always see or know. While friends and family and colleagues may see the results of the medication side effects, like weight gain, mood change, unusual fatigue, confusion, difficulty focusing, memory problems, there are largely unable to recognize that these side effects are the necessary evil of living with migraine. You again, you this book is so easy to relate to because everything that you're saying, you're like, yes, yes, it's so true. And it's so difficult, Kathy, because in many occasions you start taking a medication that you're like, well, hopefully this one helps. And then you experience all these crazy side effects that you don't know, okay, should I keep taking it because it's maybe helping? Or is it making the situation way worse because now you're dealing with all these other side effects on top of your regular symptoms? So it's like a juggle. It's juggling. It's like juggling.
it is.
Yes.
No, that's a really good point too. And also then what happens is if you say, I remember this when I was doing a lot of trial and error. This was several years ago with medications, and I came to one that was really affecting me cognitively, and my memory, and again the word drops and all that. And it's well known for doing that apparently. And I finally said to my neurologist, I said, I just don't think I can take it anymore. It's just affecting me that much. And there was almost like a sense, I got the sense from my neurologist, like, geez, what do you want? I mean, I'm giving you something that's going to help you. And now you're saying, oh, well, I can't take that. It's almost like they're frustrated with me, or I felt that I'm not willing to take what they're giving. And that's not the case. It's the case of where you have to, as you say, juggle, like what are do the benefits outweigh the adverse effects.
Yes.
And it's tough.
And you're right. And I giggle because I've experienced that as well. And I know many other people are in the same place as what we're discussing. That you go to the doctor saying, "Doctor, I don't feel this medication is sitting well with me," and the doctor kind of gets frustrated. But Kathy, we know our body better than anyone else. So when you get a sense that something's off when you're taking something, it's because something's off. Like we
Yes.
we don't imagine symptoms. We don't make them up for attention. We truly are feeling this condition and the
Exactly.
debilitating aspect of it. Kathy, page 105. Is that you? Is that your own journey?
Absolutely. That
It,
is.
that's brilliant. Like I read that page multiple times because it's so easy to relate to, and it's so incredible the way how you speak about it makes it so real
Well,
for for,
thank you.
for someone that is not living it. It's like you almost get into a moment of anger and frustration that we have to live with such a debilitating condition that doesn't get the place that it deserves to get.
Well said.
Uh,
Thank you though for that. I appreciate that.
No, thank you for writing the amazing book. Kathy, do you mind reading if we go to page 6, almost at the beginning of the book,
Sure.
before the page before warning signs at the top, it says, "What's not invisible?" If you mind reading that.
Page 6.
Gee, yes. Right before warning signs.
Oh, was this in the preface?
No, it's in part one. Part one, page
Oh,
6.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all good.
I wonder if our pages are different even. Okay. What's not invisible? That
That's
part?
the one.
I'm
Yes.
sorry.
No,
Okay,
it's all
I'm
good.
sorry. My apologies. What's not invisible is the ecstasy of waking up and knowing right away that the migraine cycle has broken. I lift my head on these days feeling like a real force has moved out of my brain and body. Suddenly, I'm me again. Do some people wake up this way most days? I never have more gratitude and mindfulness than I do when I experience this lift. I pay attention to all the beauty of the day, and I have energy because now I can live rather than exist, at least for this moment.
Thank
These are the days both migrainer and all of us close to her live for, and him, certainly.
That's perfect. It's just perfect because even though it's rough and it's hard to live with this, it also states that when we feel better, we can live rather than exist and
Yeah.
than merely survive. And I like to say, Kathy, that there is hope. There is hope. And as frustrating as this condition is, as debilitating as it is, we need to appreciate the beauty of the fact that some days are better than others,
Yes.
and we need to take advantage of those days and not overwhelming ourselves by doing a lot of things. No, but by simply breathing, enjoying, maybe spending some time, quality time with family, maybe reading a good book, maybe exercising for a little bit. But there is hope. Kathy, what would you like to say to the people that are right now experiencing a dark moment where they feel their life is it's just has ended because of this?
I'd like to say that I've been there and I feel for you intimately, and I've had that moment, and I remember it, and it took a lot of time. It took a lot of people in my life and it took the right kinds of treatments that are coming along. I mean, I think we're at a better place now for sure in terms of treatment than we've ever been. And there's much more that's coming up along in the next, I'd say, like in the next 5 years. I think we're going to see real developments. Do we see cures in the future? I don't know that that's going to happen in my lifetime, but I do think there's hope, because I would totally agree with you that um, there are days that are better than others. Some days are great, and you live those as fully as you possibly can. And and then on the dark days, what's hard too is that there's the emotional element of migraine too, right? How it affects us psychologically. And I think on the dark days, I 3 days ago, I had to say to myself, this will end. I mean, this particular one will end, and there will be good days ahead. I urge you, to keep seeking help, keep seeking, good medical care. And if you don't like the medical care you have, look somewhere else, because there are great people out there. I have a wonderful team, and I've been blessed with most all of the doctors and therapists and chiropractors and so forth that I've worked with for years now. And once you find that team and that combination of medications, and you have to be patient, you have to be so patient, and that's hard when you're in
Yes.
pain, very hard. But because our symptoms, as you so rightly put it, are so individualized. There are patterns, but there are very individualized symptoms we suffer, that it does take a lot of trial and error. And I think, again, I just want to also thank you for giving people the opportunity to learn they're not alone, and that other people are with them to support them and care for them. And also that, I hope if one thing comes out of this book, it's that you'd learn you're not alone. That everything you feel like nobody ever could have experienced this, all of this, and all that means in its entirety. And yet there are people that are experiencing it all the time, and we're here. And there are various ways, I think, now that people are reaching out, and
Yes.
many more ways than ever before.
I
So
think
there's hope for all of you. There really is.
that's a great message, and something that you said that I was like, wow, that's so true. Is basically you need to advocate for yourself if you don't
Yeah.
have the right team, because you're right. Many people don't get a good connection with their doctors.
Yeah.
Sometimes the doctors can be pushy. The doctors can be a little bit cruel in a sense that they are not very empathetic. So
Yes.
so you're right. We need to advocate for ourselves. And if you're not feeling right with that person, try to push for a different doctor, try to change for a different professional, because there are people that do care and that do want to help you. So yes, you're right. Kathy, I have three more questions. Number one is where can people find you and where can people buy your book?
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I have a website. It's www.migrainelit.com.
Mm-hmm.
I also am on Twitter, and Migraine Lit. I also am. Let's see. You can buy the book through my website, migrainelit.com. You can buy the book on Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
and you can buy it certainly through, well, Barnes and Noble, all of the major bookstores. It's readily available.
All right. Kathy, now you're a very successful professor, very well respected. You have had a few articles that you published already. You have now a book that is a great book. What does the future hold for Kathy?
Wow, is that a good question? I don't know. I'm still enjoying working with the book through, like, spending time with you today. I mean, I thoroughly enjoy the opportunity to talk about not only the book, but about migraine. I mean, it's so much, because it is an integral part of my life and who I am. Um, I welcome the opportunity to talk about it. And so right now I'm spending some time, writing about it, and also getting opportunities like this to speak with people about it. Uh, I don't know in terms of beyond that. Right now I'm just enjoying that, and I teach. I'm in the middle of the COVID teaching remotely.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Problem, I'll say. So it's not my form of teaching. I'm much more of a hands-on, face-to-face teacher, and so I miss my students that way. And so I think a lot of that, does affect me physically and mentally too. So I'm spending a lot of time working, trying to make this new way of teaching work for me, and most of all for my students.
Yeah, of course. And yes, it's been a challenge for sure, adapting to this whole COVID situation for sure, Kathy. And my last question to you is, as you know, this channel is called Find Your Chappiness. So find your happiness. What does Kathy do to find her chappiness?
Oh, I wish they were here right now. My husband's taking them on a walk, but I'm spending time with my two golden retrievers, Oliver and Greta, bring me, and my cat, Gato, who is over here actually with me. Um, they bring me great joy. And I love walking the dogs. I love hiking. And so when I'm well, I love to do those things. I love to travel, which we can't do now.
Yeah.
That brings me great happiness. I'm a gardener. I love gardening and just being, and those are the things that, like, when I talk about being able to appreciate the beauty outside, and on good days, and even on not so good days, I try to force myself to find, the gratitude for what, all that I do have. And I have, also brings me happiness right now are my Buffalo Bills. May I make a push for them? Who I'm a 48-year fan of them, fanatic, I should say, and I've suffered many bad years with my football team, but this is a good one. So I'm trying to, right, at least up through Saturday, they bring me great happiness. I don't know what's happening Saturday.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. Really appreciate it. And once again, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us and for raising awareness about chronic illnesses and chronic conditions. And once again, congratulations and thank you on the great book. It's fantastic read. I truly enjoyed it. And yes, now you have a new friend in Canada. So if you ever want to come up this way,
I
welcome to.
love Canada. I love Canada. It's a beautiful country. And you know, I just want to thank you. If I could take just a second to thank you for what you're doing to bring awareness to this disease. And I also want to thank you because any of the talks I've had up until our meeting, um, folks haven't read the full book before they talk with me. And, you know, I just really commend you that you wanted to read the book before, you know, really talking with me. I mean, and, and, and I appreciate the references you made to it and the care you've taken with it. And so, you know, for your viewership and your listeners, you know, you've got a great guy here, you know, who's helping us all. So
Thank,
thank you.
thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. That's a very kind, generous comment to say. Thank you, Kat.
My
All right,
pleasure.
Kat. Well, have a wonderful day. And then, yeah, I hope we can chat soon again.
I'd love to. I'd love to. I'd look forward to it.
All
Thank you very
right.
much.
Take
Okay.
care.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.